Hey everybody, this is your 5-6 Math Excel video. So just as a statement to begin with, the difference between this lesson and 5-5 is on 5-5 you factor, and on 5-6 set it equal to 0 and get an answer. So the statement is, when an equation has the product of two numbers equal to 0, it can be solved using the zero product property. Okay, so for number one, it says solve the equation, and you have q squared plus q minus 12 equals 0. So on this one, you're trying to multiply to get negative 12 and add to get 1. You can do your guess and check and use 4 and 3. But because it's a plus q, then you need a q plus 4 and a q minus 3. So basically just do the same process as what we did on 5-5. And then the difference in this lesson and the previous is you set each of those terms equal to 0. So x plus 4 equals 0, which means it's negative 4. X minus 3 equals 0, which means it's 3. And so negative 4 and 3 are the solutions. So that's by factoring, set it equal to 0, and using your zero product property. Another one, just to show you the process again, is if you have q squared plus 5q minus 14, you would start with, okay, well, if it's q squared, then you're going to think you're going to have q and q. And if it's going to be 14, you're going to use 7 and 2. And then because it's a plus 5, then you need a plus 7 and a minus 2. And so then your answer would be the negative 7 and the positive 2, because you got to flip your signs. One other way is graphing. So now when we're graphing on these, you use x, not q. So we would need x squared plus 5x minus 14. And there you can see your answers. They do line up perfectly in this case. So if you wanted to, you could use your table and see it's at 2, 0 and at negative 7, 0. But sometimes, like in higher math, you may get something other than that. And so I want to show you about using the zero of the graph. So we would go to Analyze, and then very first option is 0. So you're doing Analyze 0, Analyze graph in 0. And then you just say for the lower bound, let's go to this side, and I trapped it between there and there, and it was negative 7, 0. And go back to Analyze, do 0 the graph between here, and then for the upper bound I went to this side, so I get 2, 0. And so there you have it. So there's multiple ways to do these problems. Do the most efficient. But also remember that on the SAT, there's a section where you can't use your calculator, so don't become overly dependent on it, but you could use that as a backup. So on the next one, which is 5-6-4, we have r squared minus 18r plus 81. Well, the square root of 81 is 9, and this would end up being r minus 9, which means r minus 9 squared. And you set that equal to 0, and so it'd be 9. That's the only time it's true. Now, what this graph would look like is if you have x squared minus 18 x plus 81, this would be a graph where it touches or bounces on the x-intercept, on the x-axis. So let me just change this to 20, and it's not below the x-axis, it just sits on it. And so if you go to your table, it's exactly at 9, 0. And you can see the symmetry with the 8-1 and the 10-1. So 9-0 was the middle. And there your 4s match. So it's basically the same concepts we've done before. So that one just has one answer, even though it's squared. The next one is 4x squared equal 24x. So my word of caution on this one is don't divide by x. You would lose x equals 0 as a solution. I actually remember making that mistake in college. So what you really need to do is subtract so you get them on the same side. 4x squared minus 24x equals 0, and then factor out your GCF, which would be 4x, and so then you're left with x minus 6. So 4x times x is 4x squared, 4x times negative 6 is negative 24x. And then at that point, set each of the terms equal to 0, and if 4x is 0, then x is 0 when you divide by 4. And then this one, if it's x minus 6 equals 0, then x is 6. And so these are your two answers. Now, it's not the ordered pair 0, 6. It's x equals 0 and x equals 6. So just make sure you understand that those are the only two places where this equation would be true. If you put 0 in for both, it'd be 0 equals 0, which is true. And if you do the other one, you'd have 4 times 6 squared, 4 times 36. Let's just see what that is. 4 times 36 is 144. And if you have 24 times 6, 24 times 6 also gives you 144. And so if you get the same number, then it worked. So there's the math for it. 4 times 36 is 144, and 24 times 6 is also 144. Okay, for our next one, we have x squared minus 10x plus 16, and so I would use 8 and 2. And like I've been saying, if you have a plus for your last term, then both of these have either got to both be positive or both be negative. In this case, since b is negative, because you have b equal negative 10, then both of these have got to be negative. And so then you just flip your sign. X minus 8 equals 0, so x is 8. X minus 2 equals 0, so x is 2. And so those are your answers. All right. For our next one, we have 5x squared plus 13x equal negative 6. The first step they want you to do is to bring the 6 over, so you set it equal to 0. And again, this is the Berry method. With having a 5 as your coefficient, we're going to say 5x and 5x. Now, when we get to our answer, we take away one of the 5's. But this is how the Berry method starts. We have 5x and 5x. Now, if you have 5 and 6, your product would be 30. And you also want your sum to be 13. And so for this one, you're going to do 10 times 3 is 30, and 10 plus 3 is 13. So what that means is you can put 5x plus 10 and 5x plus 3. Now you factor your GCF and drop it. So factor out a 5 and you get 5 times x plus 2. And then this one you have 5x plus 3, so there is no GCF for that one. So if we cover that up by dropping it, we get x plus 2 times 5x minus plus 3 equal to 0. So again, for this lesson, you take it one step further, you solve, so you get -2, and then you would get -3/5, because you got to move your 3 over and divide by 5, and so those would be your answers. Now remember, if you did it on the calculator and got a decimal, you would have to convert it to a fraction. If you use the calculator, convert to a fraction. So let's just show that a couple of ways. So if we start our original as 5x squared plus 13x, and we do our second one as -6, that's just going to be a horizontal line right there. I would have to manipulate my screen a little bit and change my window. In particular, change your y minimum to be like -30 or -20, and then you do your intersection. So between here and here, that's -2, -6. So there's your -2 answer. And analyze intersection between here and here. This is where I have -0.5999, so forth. And so first off, you'd have to round that to -0.6. And then you'd have to say -0.6 as a fraction. So you're doing menu number fraction. That gives you -3/5, and so then -3/5 is your answer. So that's how you use your calculator to get your solutions. Okay, so then for your next one, you have 1 equal 5x squared plus 4x. The first step is subtract the 1 from both sides. And I'm showing the Berry method. Since it's 5x squared, we're going to put 5x and 5x. Your product would be -5, because 5 times -1 is -5. So your terms would be 5 times -1 or -5 times 1. And then your sum is going to be +4, and so that means you have to do the 5 and the -1. So 5 times -1 gives you -5. 5 minus 1 gives you 4. And so you just put that here. You got your 5x plus 5 and your 5x minus 1. So now the next step is factor your GCF, which is 5, and drop it. So you get x plus 1 here. And then this one has no GCF, so you just leave it. Now the difference between this one and the previous answer is this time it wants decimals rounded to 2 decimal places. So make sure you're reading your directions carefully or it will count it wrong. So this one you would want -1 and also 0.2. So remember, you could have said 1 divided by 5, Control Enter to get it, or 1 divided by 5, 1 divided by 5, menu number, convert to decimal, and it's also 0.2. Okay, so there's the first 6. Now this one is a little bit longer one because it's a word problem. It says the function h equal -16 t squared plus 1400 gives the height h in feet at t seconds. And then there's 5 different parts. So for part A, it says, what does the constant 1400 tell you about the height? So if t is 0, then the constant indicates the initial height. So that's where you start from. So like in some word problems, they say you're dropping a ball from 1400 feet high, or whatever you're dropping. So that would be your intercept. The next one says, what does the coefficient of t squared tell you about the direction it's moving? Well, it was a -16. It's negative, so that means it's accelerating down. A lot of those word problems will have -16 in there for the acceleration. The next one says, when will it be 1100 feet above the ground? So what you would do is say the -16 t squared plus 1400 equal 1100. Solve it mathematically by factoring or whatever you want to do. If you want to graph it, you could set the left side as F1, the right side as F2, and then find the intersection after adjusting your window. So that sometimes takes a little bit longer because you're dealing with the thousands. The other way to do it is just like do your equation, like move your -16 t squared to the right and move your 1100 to the left. So you get 300 equals 16 t squared, and then just divide it, and it's 75 fourths, which is 4.333. So 4 1/3 seconds. And you do just want the positive answer because it's time. You can't have a negative time answer. So that'd be what I would recommend to solve it. Then you would do the same steps for 850 feet. So again, just to show you this, you would set -16 x squared plus, in this case, 850. I'm sorry, I just typed that wrong. Plus 1400, because that doesn't change. The part that changes is this would be F2 equal 850. And it right here doesn't look like it's going to cross because you just have your window like this. But if you do zoom fit, menu 4A, you can see that it's going to cross. And you have a negative answer and a positive answer, and you just want the positive. So analyze graph, intersection. The lower is the left, the upper is the right, and so I get 5.86. So that's basically it. Now it also wants to know a reasonable domain and range, and so in that case what you do is you set it equal to 0 and solve, and so you get time is 9.35. So that means your time goes from 0 to 9.35. And so the description says, since the initial height is 1400 and when your time is 9.35, that means your height is 0, then that means your range goes from 0 to 1400. So your domain is your time, and that goes from 0 to 9.35. And then your range is your height, which goes from 0 to 1400, because you're not going below the ground. Okay, so there's the first 7 questions. There's another word problem that says the period of a pendulum is the time it takes to swing back and forth, like on a grandfather clock, for example. The function L equal 0.81 t squared relates the length L in feet to the time in seconds. A convention center has a pendulum that's 40 feet long. Find the period. So basically you just substitute L to be 40 and set it equal to 0.81 t squared. Divide it and take your square root, and we just want the positive answer. The period would be 7.03 seconds. So if you graphed it, you need the positive answer only. positive only. And the other thing I just wanted to mention is when you're studying periods in pre-cal, it's a distance. So it has to be positive. Don't want to get too much into that, but you're going to have a trig function called sine of x. And so like from here to here, that distance is 2 pi units. And so you'd say your period is 2 pi. And sometimes they're going to say p equal 2 pi, sometimes they're going to say t equal 2 pi. So that will help you understand what the period is. Period is a distance. It's, in this case, from where it starts going up to where it starts going up again, like touching the x-axis. So it couldn't be just that. The graph actually, for sine x, it goes over and over again. Sine, so I go trig, then I go sine x. It's very wavy. If you use your trig window, you go to window, then go to trig, which is number 8. This is showing 2 periods worth. So you can cover it up and say, okay, from here to here is 0 to 2 pi. From here to here is negative 2 pi to 0. Or if you wanted to do it a little different or difficult, you go from top to top, and that's a distance of 2 pi, or from bottom to bottom, which is also a distance of 2 pi. So when you'll get into pre-cal, you're going to do more relating to periods for trig. There's the trig button right there to the left of the 7, and there's all your trig functions. Okay, so moving on back to quadratics, we have this one which says solve the equation by factoring using table or graphing. We have 50x squared minus 55x plus 9 equals 0. So what you could do is just say this is your function 1 and do zoom fit and then do menu 4a if needed for the showing your graph. You want to do the 0 of the graph, and your answers should be fractions. So let's say, show what that means. If we have 50x squared minus 55x plus 9, it's pretty small there, but you can do analyze graph and go from, let's say, here to here. That gives you your 0.2, and then there's a bunch of zeros and a 12. You don't really care about the 12. That's a precision, or like it's some sort of error on the calculator. 0.2 is really the same as 1/5. And then for this other one, you go from here to here. I'm going to move my ordered pair. And so there you get 0.9. It's a bunch of 20 zeros and then the 23. So you feel safe to just cover it up and say 0.9 is the same as 9/10. So you get 1/5 and 9/10. Okay? So that's how you do that problem. Now the rest of these are pretty straightforward. It says solve by factoring using tables or graphing. For this one, we have x minus 7 squared equal 49. Well, x minus 7 squared, what does that mean? That means x minus 7 times x minus 7. And then you do FOIL, and then that means you're going to say x times x is x squared. Then you take your outside negative 7x, and then your inside negative 7x, which makes negative 14x. Then your last times last would be negative 7 times negative 7 is 49. And notice what's going to happen on all these for this problem is it's equal to the same number, because you know the square root of 49 is 7. So when you subtract, it cancels out and you get a equal to 0. So then here's my note like from earlier, don't divide by x. You're going to get x factored out to your greatest common factor. So x times x minus 14, because x times x is x squared, x times negative 14 is negative 14x. So if you divide out that x, then you're going to mess up. You're only going to get half credit. So x is 0 as an answer, and x equal 14 as an answer. So those are your two answers. Again, if you wanted to do by graphing, you could say x minus 7 squared would be your first function, and your second function would be f2x equal 49, which is a horizontal line. Then you'd have to adjust your y max to be higher than that, like 100, and then do your adjust your x min and x max as needed, and find your intersections. So what that looks like is going to a new document, adding a graph, x minus 7 squared, let's see, go to a new document, add graph, parentheses, x minus 7 squared, and that's that one which sits at 7. Remember from your transformations, it just goes over to the right 7 and bounces there, which is going to be called even multiplicity. That's a pre-cal thing. If it's an even exponent and it's bouncing there, that's called even multiplicity. And then if you put 49 here, you would have to change this to 100, like I said, to actually see where it crosses. And the first answer you can find there at 0, 49. The other answer's got to be over here, so you got to adjust your x max. So go to your window settings and change your x max to be like 30, and there you have it. So menu, analyze graph, intersection between here and here is 14, 49. So 14 would be your answer. And then the other one was just a 0 answer. Go to intersection between here and here. That's 0, 49. And so, again, 0 and 14 are your answers. It's the x answers. Okay, the next one you have is 7x squared plus 10x equal 5. So if you bring your 5 over, you have 7x squared plus 10x minus 5 is 0. Factoring looks a little different or difficult on that one. You would have your 7x and so forth if you were using your Berry method. But this one, no terms really look good for factoring because you end up getting decimals. So what I would do is just graph it and find the zeros. And then the directions say round to the 100th, which is 2 decimal places. So that'd be my recommended method for this. The other method would be, say, your left side is F1, and then your right side is F2, and do just what I did earlier, like find the intersection. X is your answer. Your Y would be 5, but your x would be negative 1.82 and 0.39. So it would have been negative 1.82 comma 5 and 0.39 comma 5. So the x part was your answer. Okay, the next one says the graphs of the pair of functions intersect. Find the x coordinates without a calculator. And the parenthetical says use substitution. So that's their directions for you. So if you have y equals something and y equal another something, then just set them equal. That's through transitive. which is the same thing as substitution. And then just solve, combine your like terms. So subtract your x squared from both sides to get 3x squared. Add 2 to both sides to cancel it out, basically, and you get 3x squared minus 15x equals 0. At that point, you just factor your greatest common factor out, which is 3x. So 3x times x is 3x squared. 3x times negative 5 is negative 15x. And so that gives you your answers 0 and 5. So graphing, you would have had 0 comma something and 5 comma something, but your y values don't matter. It would have been 0, negative 2 and 5, 23, but your y values don't matter. So just make sure y'all follow the directions. Now back to the easier ones. For extra practice A, x squared minus 144 is 0. For your square root of 144, it's 12, and so you're going to put a negative 12 and a positive 12. So this is called the difference of two squares, and so you're going to have a negative and a positive. The order doesn't matter. So when you set them equal to 0, then you're going to have a positive for this one and a negative for that one. Your next one, you have your x squared minus 32x equals 0. So your only greatest common factor is x. And so then your answers are going to be 0 and 32. Then for your last one, you have 4x squared plus 11x equal 4x plus 2. So you subtract your 4x. Those are not like terms because one of them is squared and the other isn't. So we say 4x squared minus 4x plus 11x equal 2. And then negative 4x plus 11x is 7x. Then bring your 2 over. So you have 4x squared plus 7x minus 2. So that's where you could guess and check to factor it, or factor it with the Berry method. So for the last time on the Berry method, if you have your 4x squared plus 7x minus 2, your first step would be, say it's 4x and 4x, then 4 times negative 2 is negative 8, so you want your factors of negative 8, and you want your sum to be 7. So that means you have to have a positive 8 and a negative 1. And so then you're going to have 4x plus 8 and 4x minus 1. Do your GCF, and so your 4 gets factored out. You have 4 times x plus 2, and then this one has no GCF. You drop the front 4, which is the Berry, drop the Berry, and then you have x plus 2, and then your 4x minus 1. The order doesn't matter. And so then you get negative 2, and then eventually you get positive 1/4. You basically add 1 and divide by 4. So those are your two answers. All right, so again, that's how you do your Math Excel. Feel free to ask questions in class. Have a good day.